writing this book was a little bit depressing. I think it's because I have these memories of Myrtle as a really vibrant, busy little town. People running around to the left and to the right, and all these little stores open, and all these things going on. And then when you go to Myrtle now, it's not that way. And I guess there's something about, I'm 66 years old, and I'm thinking, I lived during the best time in the world, the 50s and the 60s. I mean, I don't think there was a better time. And I'm thinking, I really wish I could do it again. I wish it was still that way. Your good friends and the things that you did and the places you went, and at times it got a little bit depressing. Now, I went home and I'd go home and I told Betty, I said, I'm so depressed. She said, well, I've been working on my book today. She said, well, if it depresses you, why do you do it? I said, because I want to get through. I think off and on, I've probably been working on it about a year. It's kind of hard. I don't remember the date I started. I guess I could go back and look on my computer because it'll show my start date. But probably about a year. And I'd work on it some and then I'd quit. And then somebody'd say, how's your book coming? I got to get back on it. Well, what I had done is Facebook kind of opened up something for me. I began to write these little stories on Facebook about being a kid or things that happened when I was a kid. And the people that would read them would make a comment and they'd say, Alan, really enjoyed your story. Do this more often. And then a couple of them said, Alan, you need to write a book. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Why would I write a book? Because who would read a book that I wrote? And when Mr. Wayne Gaines passed away, I went to his funeral, and I was standing by the casket with Miss Shirley, and we started talking about Myrtle, and I told her how much Wayne had always meant to me as a kid growing up, and one of my earlier memories was going in a little store that he owned at Myrtle, and when you walked in the front door, there was a little round top Coke machine. It cost a nickel to get a Coke, and when they went to 6 cents, he taped a cigar box to the side of the machine, and you put your nickel in the Coke box, and then you put your penny in the cigar box to make up the 6 cents. But I'd go in there and buy candy and stuff, and so I remembered Mr. Wayne from when I was real little, and when he had a service station in Myrtle, later I worked for him one summer, and he just was always kind of a special guy to me. And I said, we got talking about the different characters that there were in Myrtle. And she and I stood there, and we named about probably close to a dozen of the people we considered to be Myrtle's characters. And she said, you need to write a book about them. She said, if you don't, they'll be forgotten. Nobody will ever know who they were. And I thought, she's right. I really do probably need to. And I talked to my wife about it, and I talked to my girls about it. And my girl said, Daddy, do it. I got 12 grandkids. And she said, all the grandkids would love to read about the things you did when you were little and the people that you knew. So really what prompted me to actually write the book, I guess, was Shirley Gaines and my kids. They actually were the deciding factor that pushed me into writing it. But yeah, there were times it got a little depressing, but a lot of times, and wake up in the middle of the night, and I'd think about something, I got to put that in my book. And I couldn't go back to sleep because I was afraid I'd forget it, But it was interesting. I learned a lot, remembered a lot. When you start writing about something, it's like I said, I have this little memory rabbit that jumps up in my head, and I have to stop what I'm doing and chase that little memory rabbit because I don't know where it's going to take me. It may bring up a whole bunch of other memories, and then I go back. But the good thing about it, in real life, I would forget where I started, but in a book, I can go back and see where I was when I quit, and I can pick back up and go on. But it's quite an adventure, I guess. I didn't write this to be a history of Myrtle. I just did it. It's just what I remember as a little boy growing up in town. But some of the characters, they're a part of Myrtle history. Yeah. everything in it is, you know, real and honest to the best of my ability and my memory. But I've often said that nobody's memory is perfect. So when people read this, they may see something, they say, well, that just doesn't seem right. I don't think that's right. And it might not be. The way I saw it, somebody else could have seen it, you know, in a little different light. But it was fun to go back and just think and remember and try to tie things together. And I think for the most part, it's pretty accurate about the little town I grew up in, about Myrtle and the people and the different characters that we had around town, the businesses. Yeah, it was all about being a kid in a small town, feeling very protected, very safe. It's just a really, really neat place to grow up. Around 200, I think, at the time, because if I remember right, there was a sign on the highway that said Myrtle, P-O-P, and it had a number. And I think it was something like 206 or 207. And I was thinking, I remember as a kid, I thought, what's a lot of people? The only building that's left from when I went to school is our 1st through the 6th grade building. It's still standing. Well, I take that back. The part of the old shop and the home ec building is still there. But I do mention school all the way from 1st grade to finishing. I mentioned a lot of my teachers, the ones I remembered the best. Of course, my favorite teacher was Miss Edna Gatlin. And it was kind of funny. We had a nickname for Miss Gatlin. Eddie Lou Mitchell, a classmate of mine, coined this phrase. She called her Edna Baby. Edna Baby. And we used that nickname anytime we knew she wasn't around. But we would never say that in front of her. We had way too much respect for Miss Gatlin. She was a really, really good English teacher. But it was, you know, the school thing was good memories and bad memories. I think probably one of my memories of school was when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. We were all in, I believe it was 7th grade. We were in, I remember the classroom we were in. Miss Dottie Wells was a teacher. She had a knock on the door. She stepped outside. And when she came back, she told the class that the president has been killed. And you would have thought we would have been sad, and we clapped. I don't know who started it. I don't know, but the crowd, the whole class broke out in an applause. You know, we were just 7th graders. We didn't know what we liked, but we knew what our parents liked and didn't like. And our parents did not like John F. Kennedy. He was not a popular president in the South. And when we heard that he'd been assassinated, we all began to clap. And in the next 2 or 3 days, they showed the funeral, and you realized he wasn't just a president. He was a father and a brother and a husband, and your whole idea about him changed, and you wish you could go back and take back that clap, but you couldn't do it. What's done is done. But that was just one of the little memories I had. I think one of my best memories is when the Wrestling Bear came to town. I was about 5 years old, and Peanut Pickens, a friend of mine from Myrtle, was visiting his granddaddy next door. And Peanut came up to me, he said, "Are you worried that that bear is going to get loose and come get you?" And I said, "What bear?" He said, "The bear in that big tent down there by the school." And I said, "No." I was kind of worried, but I didn't want Peanut to know it. So I go home and I tell my grandparents about the bear. And there really was a bear, and they had this little tent set up. And the tent was about probably 30 by 30. And they had a bear with a muzzle. And the boys from Myrtle could pay to wrestle the bear. And if they got the bear off of its feet, they won money. And they had little bleachers set up. So my granddaddy took me to the Wrestling Bear show. And I remember it really, really well. The guy had a little monkey, a little red bellman outfit, a little red cap. And in intermission, he let the monkey go, and the monkey came with a little rail right in front of where you were sitting, and with a tin cup. And if you dropped a coin in, little monkey tipped his hat to you. So Granddaddy gave me a coin real quick, and I dropped a coin in, and the little monkey tipped his hat. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. I don't know which I like best, the monkey or the bear. But I remember the bear wrestling, and in the book I do mention a couple of people about the bear wrestling. I do mention one particular person that if I had money to put on it, I'd have put money on him beating the bear. And the guy I put on it was Hayes Hall. Hayes was always a really strong, outgoing young guy, and I thought if Hayes couldn't have whipped him, he could have at least talked him into submission, because Hayes was quite a character. He was one of Myrtle's characters. It was just a lot of different people. I mean, when I sit here, I just start thinking about all these different characters, and I guess every little town has them. I don't think it's any different anywhere in the world, but I grew up in Myrtle, so the characters I knew were Myrtle characters. And if you grew up in Etta, you knew all the Etta characters. If you grew up in some little town in Missouri, you knew all of your little characters. I think we all had the same experiences. They were just in different places, different times, different names of towns, but we shared the same youthful experience. Well, if it hadn't been for Paul Nolan, I got to give Paul credit, I would probably never have tackled this. But I sat down and talked with Paul, and I said, Paul, how do you get a book published? He said, well, it's not really that difficult, but he told me who he had used, a particular company, so I contacted that company, and I talked to a guy, and they gave me the prices, told me how it all worked, and that's what I did. I always thought you had to have a book or a story, so to speak, that you sent off to somebody, and they read it, and they said, okay, this is worthy of publishing, or this is not worthy of publishing. And that's why I never thought about publishing a book. And when Paul did it, I thought, what if Paul can do it, I ought to be able to do it. So he really was an encourager for me on that. And but I used a personal deal to just work it up and get it done. It's all done over computer, and I proofread, and we'd get back together, and I proofread again and make changes. And they did do some. What they did was they highlighted everything that they thought should be a little different. And then over to the right, they would make these proposals, like maybe I'd used a word that they didn't quite agree with, and they would have that word over to the right. Well, I had a choice to accept that word or to reject that word and keep the word I had. And sometimes I accepted and sometimes I rejected. I know that they told me that my book was really very cleanly written. The problem I ran into was spacing. After commas, before commas, I had extra spaces or whatever, and I think it was my computer. Sometimes it's hard to tell if I've got one space or two spaces. So I had to go back and make a lot of those little corrections. I had one or two words I think maybe I had to do a little changing on. It really was pretty simple. Once I figured out what was going on, and it worked. They did the cover for me. And it wasn't exactly what I had wanted. What I wanted was a sign that said small town, and then I wanted the sun rising behind it, and I wanted it shining through the small town, and the reflection on the ground to be big memories. And I guess they really couldn't do that, or they didn't get the idea, and I told them I had to have a rabbit on it somewhere. And so this is what they ended up with, and I saw it. They gave me two choices, and this was by far the better of the two choices. So this was the choice that I took, and they considered this to be a custom cover. So I think I'm pleased with it. It'll work. If I remember correctly, they're right at 200 pages, and I really had wanted larger type, but by the time I got through, to go back and make it larger type, there was an extra charge to it. I looked at it again and I said, that's okay, leave it like it is. At some point, you realize it's perfection is probably not going to be had, so you just have to accept the very best that you can get, and I accepted it the way it was, and we're going to print. My book should be in, my first book should be in to me the first part of next week. Retail price is going to be $15, and I know you can get them at Copyright. But I think also you can get them at Amazon, order them from Amazon. And hopefully, I haven't ironed it out yet, but hopefully I'll have a book signing at the Myrtle Library. And I know Paul did, and I think it went over really well. And people can come pick up a book, and I'll autograph it for them, and play the author thing. And I'm kind of looking forward to that.